I'm here with Jan Carroll for a morning meditation. And Jan is a local poet and who has written on topics especially about the environment and about the Chippewa River and many other beautiful things. And I wanted to just introduce you, Jan, if you want to say a few words about who you are and why poetry is important to you.
Okay. Thanks, Julie. Um, I've been writing poetry for a long time, off and on throughout my life. More, more seriously in the last 10 years. Um, I did write a book mainly on climate change related poems about a couple of years ago before the pandemic. But I do like to walk and I do like to write poems that come to me as I'm walking or out in nature. So that tends to be a theme for me for my poetry quite a bit.
Is there a sense of meditation that you find in writing poetry or trying to find the words to reflect those feelings that you have as you're looking at the world?
Yeah, very much so. I think that's the main reason for writing is the experience of the process of writing and also interacting with a poem that's already written. Um, you can sit down and do the analysis of a poem too, but for me, it's mainly getting whatever um, spiritual nugget of wisdom might be in that poem. Um, and it doesn't have to be, like a religious, traditional religious theme, but just something that can help us a little bite of wisdom to help us, carry on with our day to day life.
Did you find yourself doing this early on in life, or is this something you discovered later?
Writing poetry.
Yeah, your a love of words and poetry, and
Yeah, I mean, I even have books, little short stories I wrote when I was in grade school, but probably started writing poetry more in high school. And I would say earlier on, it may have had more of the theme of relationships, romantic relationships. Um, but uh, and then there were periods in my life where I didn't write and then came back to it. So it does feel like when I'm writing, it's better for me. It always feels like a little gift if I've from the universe or whatever, if I'm able to actually write something, even if it's not great. Yeah, it's just encouraging. It just feels like it's part of who I am.
if you were to encourage someone in a time of meditation, what would you say to them about accessing those words or to get them in the right mindset for poetry?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think part of it with poetry is to not feel like you have to understand what the intention of the author was or what it quote unquote means, but let it speak to you. And it may only be one or two lines in that poem that speak to you, and the rest maybe you don't get, or maybe they don't make sense. But if you have a couple lines or a section of the poem that really speaks to you, then hold that in your heart and um, let it feed you and let it speak to you. I think we have had uh, misdirection sometimes in how to interact with poems, and we can think that only trained people know how to understand a poem, and there's a truth to that, I guess, at a certain level. But what you get from a poem might be different than what another person in our writing group at little writing group that we had at church. It was always funny. I remember once we were reading a poem and one person said, "Oh, this is so great. This is just speaking so much to my situation at work right now." And another person said, "What? No, this is about me and my sister." And another person said, no, this is about, my childhood or something. So each thing, a poem can speak to different people differently. So let it speak to you um, as it speaks to you. And then maybe, if it's something that really touches you, maybe you want to print it out or have it, tape it on your wall by your computer or something, and have it be part of your practice when you're doing other meditation or prayers, if you do prayers. And maybe on different days it'll speak to you in a different way. And then when it doesn't anymore, that's fine. Just let it go and move on to the next thing. I feel like we sort of eat in a pasture, and as long as it's feeding us, and when it doesn't anymore, then we can move on to the next pasture and look for that next clearing in the woods to feed us. So yeah.
Thank you. I wonder if you would be willing to share a poem, if you have any
Sure.
available, and we could do it in a meditative way. I've got a bell nearby,
Okay.
and maybe we could invite people into a time of silence and sitting in this space with their breath, and maybe have some silence after
And are
you.
you hoping for a nature related poem?
If you want to share that, that would be wonderful.
All right, let me just look here.
Okay.
Well, how about this one? It doesn't have a title. One thing that when I'm walking, I walk by the river a lot, and one thing I really love, and which seems to be sort of healing to me, is when there's like the little ripples in the river.
Mm-hmm.
Our river, the Chippewa River here, tends to be just a big body of water moving
Mm-hmm.
along, but there's places where it's kind of ripply, and one of those places is if you're on the bike path, you go under the Lake Street Bridge. There's some ripples there, and so I wrote this poem about that. So do you want to ring the bell first, or?
Sure. Yeah, let's invite everybody to sit quietly, connect with their breath, and gentle their gaze. I'll ring the bell.
I don't know why watching these gurgling strands in the river heals me like nothing else can. There may be a ribbon of resonance, my inner watery form sympathizing, synchronizing with this outer bit of babbling. But I think it's more the particular beauty, a laughter that's part of the inevitable greater pole, a lightness, a change in the more staid melody, a bridge, a turn, adding meaningful contradiction to the duller yet necessary flow. Both of these arts of the river carried us here from some almost forgotten source and send us toward our ability to open into something bigger than ourselves we couldn't have pictured though we tried. Wide, deep, mind-blowing ocean.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other thoughts on, when you were writing your book about climate change, um, and now during this year of being a little bit more sequestered?
Yeah.
Curious how that has impacted your poetry or your thoughts on environmentalism or nature.
Well, I'm not, that's a really big question.
It is.
Um,
Take it where you want.
I guess the pandemic, initially, I'd say for several months, I wasn't able to write at all. I didn't even want to think about writing.
Right.
It felt like it was something I used to be. I think, and as I talked to a lot of creatives and just anybody, I think a lot of people had that experience. It was just such a change for everyone. Um, and I just let myself be okay with that. And eventually, some words started coming again, and I was able to write. And that was assisted by my times when I would go out in nature. Pretty much early in the pandemic, and certainly through the winter, I started every day going out at 10 o'clock. And I would drive a little bit just to be like, oh, there's the world. The world is still here. And then I would try to find a park to just sit in the car, and would have some books with me and pen and pencil if I wanted to write something. And I think that practice of being out in nature, first of all, was so healing, and reassuring. And then I think just more of a byproduct of that was that it got me back into writing a little bit more by giving me some thoughts as I was out there in nature. I think it's been hard to think about climate change, during this time, and then all our political turmoil we had, maybe are still having in many ways. It's been stressful, and I do really feel that nature is a healer, and we were created to be in and be more connected to nature. So, when we were all supposed to be staying in our homes and stuff, that sort of cut us off from it. But we could still go out on our own. We could still go for a walk, which I try to do each day too. And we could still go out and sit in a park, even in the winter. I would take a little blanket and have a blanket on my lap and whatnot. And it's important to stay connected. And that might not seem like anything that's going to solve the big problem of all the issues of climate change that we're facing. But it's definitely part of it. And, just trying to find ways that we can reconnect with nature and with each other in nature, I think are part of the solution. And beyond that, I guess I don't really have any answers about climate change, but I guess we've all been thinking much more about the immediate thing of the pandemic. Kind of getting through with that, trying not to be sick.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, any closing thoughts for just that sense of connection, and you can definitely hear that thread through your poetry, that that clarity and connection to something distilled and deeper, and how that feels to do that.
How it feels to connect with it.
Yeah, to connect with it and to write. Yeah.
Well, I think for me, my spiritual belief is I believe in some kind of spiritual reality that's greater than ourselves. I don't know exactly what that is. I don't feel like I have to know exactly what it is. And I do have other parts of my spiritual practice, not just poetry, which help. And so I guess when I have those times of connection in nature, or in writing, or in talking with another human being, or in other ways, it brings me into a closer feeling of communion with that greater spiritual reality, part of which is the earth and the universe, and the physical universe. It's a grounding and also an inspiration at the same time, I guess is how I would put it. Especially in times like we've experienced recently, where everything can seem so cataclysmic and like, who are we and what's going on and what is our country and where are we going and all this. It can, I think, for me, that's a very, to have that spiritual grounding is comforting and yet also prompts me to try to understand what can I do then with that I've been given. And that's part of, for me, what writing is trying to give back through my writing to help other people be comforted and nourished and fed by some of these ideas that I've been shown.
Well, thank you for sharing your meditation and on writing and beautiful poetry. Is there, if you were to close out this time, do you have one last poem that you might like to share? Or?
Sure. Let's see. I did just put together a little collection of a bunch of my nature poems, so I'm just paging through that now and seeing what might be a good one. I guess this one is a good example of what we've been talking about. Do you have any friends that are trees? Do you have any trees that are friends? If not, how can you know what it is to be rooted? How will you learn to grow ring on ring? Let limbs bend and give in challenging breezes, yet blossom, and in time bear some kind of fruit. I have a lot of tree friends.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Julie, so much.
Well, thank you.